Welcome to the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen, covering the week that was in professional wrestling. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Juice Box. Of course, I'm Juice Springsteen, but this is a normal edition of the SIP series with an unnormal guest, a special guest, a very special guest. I'd like to introduce him like this. In the 1990s, Don Mattingly was Donny Baseball. In the early 2010s, Johnny Manziel was Johnny Football. Johnny Gaudreau was Johnny Hockey, may he rest in peace. And even Johnny Gargano was Johnny Wrestling. But here locally in the Pittsburgh area, there is a man so eloquently named Donny Football who provides a unique perspective on football and life on 93.7 The Fan. But now in 2024, and from this show going forth and all subsequent pro wrestling shows that he attends, my guest at this time will now be known as Donny Wrestling. Welcome to the Juice Box, Donny. How are you doing?
Good, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the intro as well, for the kind words.
Yeah, man. I mean, it's a little out of left field, I feel like, for people maybe not in this area, for you showing up on this show specifically. But as a loyal listener of sports talk radio for pretty much my whole life, anytime people come in with a little bit of inkling of wrestling, I'm like, oh, that's cool. It's still out in the ether and people still like it. And then, you know, you and the PM guys, you guys always talk about wrestling. And it was like, man, these guys really, it's not just like random easy stuff. You guys are rattling off stuff. You guys are watching the show in the back, so it always intrigued me. So that's why I had to reach out and bring you forth. Let's just get to it, man. How did you first get introduced to wrestling at all?
So I was born in 95, October of 95. So I was a little bit too young to really take in the Attitude Era at its peak, which, you know, obviously anybody will tell you it was the hottest era in wrestling history. You had the Monday Night War, you had WWE, you had ECW, you had WCW, you know, everything kind of like all battling each other. And, you know, ECW would kind of pick sides at times. But I feel like the era that I grew up in, it was so easy to get into because it brought in like that new wave, that new era of superstar. Like I grew up watching wrestling the same time that John Cena debuted, Randy Orton debuted, Batista debuted, Brock Lesnar debuted. I think Shelton Benjamin was in that group as well. Like that was like their 2002 rookie class was the most loaded probably in wrestling history. So that was like the era that got me into it. But I've gone back and watched, you know, a lot of stuff on the Attitude Era. I've gone back and watched stuff on, you know, wrestling in the 80s and even before that. I went back. This is probably 5 years ago now. I've watched back every single WrestleMania.
That's always a fun thing to do, for sure.
Yeah, so like it was cool to see how that changed over time. But, you know, it was something that when I was around 6-7 years old, like I just started to watch. One night my, you know, dad would just tell me about, you know, his day when it was, you know, Rowdy Roddy Piper was his all-time favorite because he always liked the bad guys. And, you know, that
your dad was ahead of his time. Your dad was ahead of his time.
He really was. So he got me into it like that way. Like any other kid, I would watch religiously both shows every week. You know, I had a bunch of action figures that I think I still have somewhere in like a storage unit. So
of course you do. Yeah, we all got something related. That's why I brought you on. It's people that have had it for a little bit or a lot or before or after. It's always around, man.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, you know, maybe even though my love for it isn't as strong as it was when I was 6 years old, you know, it has still been part of my life all the way through. But like that era, the ruthless aggression era, that got me into it pretty easily.
And that's what I was going to say. You talked about the Attitude Era, but you got right into the Ruthless Aggression Era. And I mean, I'm only 2 years, I think, older than you. So I remember a little bit more of the Monday Night War, but just like you, I got back into it because WCW got sold in 01. So for that 4-year stretch, I was like gone. And then WrestleMania 21, where Cena and Batista win the world titles. And that starts that whole new era of those guys being at the top. And I never really looked back. So that's people kind of, when they talk about the 80s, your parents watched it, your grandpa, whatever, and they always revere about how great it was. I think a lot of people are actually going to come around to how great the Ruthless Aggression Era was, and kind of like an underrated thing because a lot of those guys somehow are still wrestling.
I've actually argued, not really argued, but my friends and I have had the debates before because I have plenty of friends from college, a couple of guys from high school who are maybe even more into pro wrestling than I am. And I've come down on the side of, maybe the Ruthless Aggression Era wasn't as hot as the Attitude Era in terms of making money, but I think overall product, it was better. I think the in-ring wrestling was absolutely better than what, because you go back and watch some of the stuff from the Attitude Era, that was made a lot from the storyline. The crowds were always insanely into the show. Characters like Stone Cold and The Rock, not to dump on like Triple H or Kurt Angle or Mick Foley or any of those guys, but they had like two of the most popular wrestlers of all time
ever at the same time.
And Ruthless Aggression, you had dudes that could actually wrestle. Not that those guys couldn't, but you had a lot more guys that could. Like pretty much everybody that went out there knew what they were doing. And then I thought that was a good mix of maybe the storylines aren't as cutting edge, but the wrestling ability was a whole lot better. Plus, when you're a kid, you're more inclined to watch for the actual wrestling. Like you're not as hooked into the storylines when you're 6, 7, 8 years old. So you go back and watch and it's still pretty good. But yeah, I mean, I think the wrestling that we got 20 years ago will absolutely stand the test of time, like the Attitude Era, like the 1980s when they got into like the Rock and wrestling and stuff like that.
Yeah, man, I think I agree with it pretty much everything you said. Like, and if anything, those years, like you mentioned, the Ruthless Aggression Era didn't really make a lot of money. In fact, some of the years in that like 07 to like 2011 was very just like not great. And Cena had to be at the top, taking like he was at the top for all the down years, which makes me respect him even more that he could carry a company. After you're in a period of this, you lose Austin, you lose The Rock. It's down to you, man. You got to really hold the flag. So do you have a specific, like you kind of mentioned it, but a specific first wrestling memory, like vividly, or like the first show you may have seen that you can recall?
So one of the first, probably not the first episode I've ever watched, but the one that always stuck in my head, just viewing it on TV. I'll get to my first live show in a moment because that's a pretty cool one too. The first one I remember, or I guess that I remember best from watching from that time, would have been 2002. I can't remember the exact date, but it was the SmackDown episode when Lesnar and Big Show broke the ring. That was like the first time something like that happened, at least first time in a long time. I don't know about way back in the day.
Never like that. They had a Big Show choke slammed Undertaker through the ring.
I
like
remember
a hole.
that. Yeah, I remember seeing that clip.
Broken like that, I don't think ever happened because now you see it's happened a few times since. So it had to happen the first time somewhere.
And it's never like they've done the spot a few times. It's always cool, but it's never as cool as that first time. Like that.
No.
That time that they did it on SmackDown was great. So that's like one of the first SmackDowns I vividly remember. And then the first live show I went to, it was actually a house show in Ocean City, Maryland. It was at the Ocean City Convention Center, and it was in July.
It sounds like a house show.
Yeah, July of 2005. And the main event of that show was Eddie Guerrero versus Batista for the title, which that one's really cool to me thinking back. Obviously, a few months later, Eddie passes away,
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
he was absolutely in my top 5 growing up. I mean, I think a lot of people would agree if like they watched that time specifically, like how entertaining that dude was. I didn't go
Yeah.
to an actual like televised or pay-per-view until my senior year of high school. I went to the Royal Rumble in 2014. That was the first like
Yep.
notable show I went to, and since then I've gone to pretty much any Raw or SmackDown I can get a chance to see, or anytime we do have a premium live event now. We don't call them pay-per-views anymore, but
No, we
anytime we
don't.
have one of those, I try to get there.
Yeah, and you got Latino Heat. You got the shirt right there,
Oh yeah.
which is perfect, man. Eddie Guerrero, I think a lot of people gave him credit at the time, but I don't think they gave him enough credit until he passed, unfortunately. And for you to see him only months before then, I honestly couldn't tell you if any of the shows I had seen before he passed had him on it. Like that's pretty wild to think.
Yeah,
Um,
it's like surreal thinking back. Like, man, I'll always have that memory, like, in a crowd of, I don't know, probably like 2,000, 3,000
yeah,
people. And I was 9 years old in Ocean City, Maryland. My dad and I went, and the couple things I remember about that show was Eddie versus Batista in the main event. I got like a high five from Booker T as he was walking to the ring. I don't
there
remember
you
who
go.
he even wrestled. And then with the help of my dad, because I wasn't old enough, the first ever CD purchase was John Cena and the Trademark.
Hey,
So
I bought that CD that the week that it dropped. I was all in. Maybe that's why I got back into it. Like everything was just hitting at the right times.
it's so funny too, like thinking about Cena when he started versus now, because I mean, I guess we've kind of seen that trajectory with The Rock. I mean, they're two of the most popular people on the
Yeah.
planet. Like
Oh yeah,
I think they're
people,
within the
not just
yeah,
wrestlers. People. It's
yeah.
crazy.
Like I think you think of the top 5, I think at least 3 of them are like Taylor Swift is probably one of them.
Yep.
I think The Rock and John Cena are probably up there too. Like you can't find somebody who doesn't know who those two guys are. And
It's crazy.
it's always funny to me, like they got their start in pro wrestling, and Cena, he comes onto the scene kind of like a, greenish guy. I always thought his story was cool, how he almost got
Oh
fired and
yeah.
then he just freestyle rapped in the back of a bus.
Unreal.
Here we go. I mean, he also was just the spark of a whole generation of kids
For sure.
who wanted to have like random jerseys all the time. Like
Love that. Love that stuff.
every time he came out with the jerseys on, I think like every holiday, my dad would just get me some like cheap eBay or like Walmart jersey of like just a good NFL player. It didn't have to be
Yeah.
a Steeler, but it would be like, I don't know, Javon Curse or Junior Seau or somebody like that. All because Cena would always roll out in these jerseys, and every kid also liked to pump up their shoes.
Oh, me too. I had the Live Strong bracelets hooked around him too. Because
Yeah,
he was all anything that he was doing. I feel like if you were a kid at that time, you were all in on that stuff.
yeah. The jorts. I mean,
Oh yeah,
he
he
has
popularized jorts,
single handedly kept the jorts business going.
which is crazy because Steve Austin kind of started that. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah, he did. That's for sure. And then Cena had him a little bit longer. They were
he
down
did.
below the knee.
They sure were, man. So kind of transitioning from that, what you have any like a favorite wrestler? If you had to pick one favorite wrestler growing up, who would it be?
I mean, it is hard for me to not say Cena. I think just because I just grew up at the time where the guy exploded. I mean, I always tried to buckle down on like a top 5, and it is pretty much all dudes from the Ruthless Aggression. And then,
Yeah,
I always throw Stone Cold Steve Austin in there because I didn't see him at his peak live, but I've gone back and watched enough. Like he was the
he's so
absolute
over.
coolest,
Yeah,
like coolest pro wrestler of all time. Um, I mean, I guess The Rock's up there too,
Yeah.
but Austin's always in there. Guerrero absolutely in there. Cena absolutely in there. I think Randy Orton has an argument too for me.
Oh,
Like
for sure.
he's the same way. Like he came in the same time as Cena, uh, third generation guy. So you could kind of say that he was destined for big things no matter
For
what.
sure.
But I mean, he has, to his credit, he has really never taken time off other than an injury or if he gets in some sort of trouble
Right.
outside of the ring. But the dude has never left. He has never left all this time. So I throw Lesnar in there too.
Yeah,
I know
man, it's all in that ruthless aggression window too. That's crazy.
yeah,
But
like
it's all worth it. I buy it. Every person you're saying, I'm like, yeah, you can make a case.
yeah. I mean, then you have every kid is also always drawn to Rey Mysterio, because he would
Absolutely.
change up the attire every week with the colors and high flyer, fun dude. I mean, another guy. I know it's not good to say his name, but like Chris Benoit when he was like in his heyday, obviously
Yeah,
what he did
yeah,
was terrible,
of
but
course.
I mean that guy was a hell of a performer.
Anytime I watch a match with Benoit in it, it's just like you see something that happens, like a headshot, a chair shot, something, and you're like, damn, like,
Yeah.
why was it? It always seemed like it was him at as the receiving end of that, and then it's like, well, you wonder why everything went downhill.
I also always enjoyed when you have guys that make it feel legit. Obviously, the easy poke
Yes.
everybody takes at pro wrestling is that it's fake or phony.
Yeah.
Like, okay, the outcome obviously is fixed, but
Sure.
like Benoit, Lesnar. I mean, even Cena and Orton, I think to a degree. Kurt
I'd
Angle,
put
absolutely.
Angle. I'd put Brian Danielson. I'd put him in
Yeah,
there. They make it look
yeah,
real all the time.
yeah. Like the guys that make it feel legit, I think, are a lot better. Like that's probably why, and not that I'm like, I know the guys now. I don't get to watch religiously, but I think that's the reason why, in terms of guys today, like that's why Gunther for me is so high up there
Yes.
because I think he's kind of in that same category. Like the guys that make it feel like it's more
Real.
legit than what it is.
Yeah, and we'll kind of talk about that later on when we discuss like some of the football aspects because you're Donny football. We had to bring you in for a wrestling thing, so we're gonna kind of cross over. How about a favorite tag team all time? Could you pick one?
Dudley Boys. Yeah,
Okay.
I think that's normally the definitive one for me. I know that the Legion of Doom, the Road Warriors, like they're going to be pretty much anybody's pick from my dad's era, I would say.
Yeah.
And maybe even a little bit older than me. And those two were legends. Like that's an all-time great tag team. I mean, the Hardy Boys were great. Edge and Christian were great, but the Dudley Boys, I just feel like I related to them a little bit more. Like, I'm a big fella, or I used to be a much bigger fella, but
Awaken 180.
yeah, but Bubba Ray and Devon, I mean, I
Yeah.
also think the 3D might be the best tag team finisher of all time.
Yeah, it was like it looked legit, but it was pretty safe if you knew how to do it, and it happened out of nowhere. Like you just hit off the ropes and you're done.
Yeah, and the way the crowd would react, knowing it was coming, was great. Like I feel like they had better crowd interaction than any of the other like Attitude Era tag teams or really anybody since. Like they get the tables thing, they do the 3D,
Yeah, right.
they do the was up.
Yeah, you know what? You're right. They do have a lot of different crowd calls that maybe other teams have one or two, but you just rattled off like four different ones, and they're all huge.
Yeah, like some of their moments too are wild to like look back on now in 2024. Yeah. Like, I mean, everybody, if you ever show anybody the clip of them power bombing Mae Young,
that's what I was gonna say.
It's like, okay, how do they not just kill this old lady? And then meanwhile, like the way they did it, she barely took any of a bump. But yeah, like those moments are great.
Those guys are legends and pros. I mean, they've been doing it and had done it for well over 20 years. One of the most decorated tag teams ever. Won a title in every damn company that they were ever in. So my dad was a fan of them. I was Spike Dudley for Halloween. I think like in the late '90s. So I was all in on them too, man.
I've always wanted to get. It's probably super expensive, but the like one of those OG like tie-dye Dudley Boys shirts.
Yeah,
I
those
saw
are
a
tough.
guy at a concert that had one of those on. I wish I would have gone up to him and asked him where he got it because it was awesome. Like the other note about them,
Yeah.
which I didn't discover until I watched the rise and fall of
Oh
ECW.
yeah. Which, by the way, that if any wrestling fan needs any lesson on a company, that is the greatest documentary ever.
I was unaware until I watched that about the Heatwave 1995 or 99 promo.
Yeah.
And that
Yep.
is one that I don't think it'll ever be topped.
I don't think anyone's gonna attempt to top it, but yeah,
you're not really allowed to top it at this point with some of the verbiage that was used, but that was a wild one.
Yeah, they were a wild tag team. I didn't know where you were gonna go with tag teams, but I did want to kind of parlay that into something that you do with tailgating in football, and your friends, the group is called the Nasty Boys, and I wanted to know, where did that come from, and is it any relation to the actual tag team? And if not, have you watched any of the Nasty Boys work? Because you should. Great stuff.
I mean, I've like seen on like older, shows that we'll watch, like, as you mentioned, myself, Pony, Chris, like I'll throw on like old pay-per-views in the back while we're getting ready for shows, and like they will certainly be on like some of the events. But it mostly came about because I have two buddies. They no longer have the same haircuts, but one of them was my buddy Chase. He had a like Jerry curled mullet, where he would like perm it basically.
Yeah.
And Chase is about 330 pounds. So he's a big fella, like 6'1", 330.
Yeah, that's big.
One of my other good friends, he not quite a mullet, but like a little bit of a funny hairdo. He and Chase, they both often wore like like Viper sunglasses. Is that what they're called?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So they wore those often, and just like total goofballs. So they kind of resembled both Nasty Boys. And even though it's only two guys, Pony and Chris met them at a tailgate a few years ago, and that's where they sparked it. So now, even though it's a group of like 20 dudes, that's just that's how the Nasty Boys nickname came about.
I love that, man. If I had to recommend one match of the Nasty Boys, I can send you the link or something later, but those guys versus the Steiner brothers at Halloween Havoc 1990, I think is something you would really enjoy. Okay. They beat the tar out of each other because the Steiners are about as real as it gets too. So
that's when you're talking about the real conversation, those guys got to be up there.
Absolutely. Now, we kind of touched on the fan and stuff like that. Now, I had Josh Taylor on this program. I don't know if you've met Josh, but he's he's run around on KDK. He's all over the place. He's a jack of all trades. And I asked him these next two questions, and I'm curious to hear your answers. Who at the fan loves wrestling? Just outright could tell you that they loved it or watched it before that you're aware
of. So Chris definitely, he watched it. It seemed like pretty religiously through the Attitude Era. Pony more so, and it's kind of funny. Pony he has like that photogenic memory.
Yeah.
He was more so a fan. Like his peak fandom came at pretty much the worst era, like late 80s, mid 90s. Where like the rosters were just a bunch of like jobbers and then like a few big stars.
Yeah, business was down across the board there.
Yeah, he attended, because he's from upstate New York, he attended the 92 Royal Rumble.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So
that's the greatest Royal Rumble of all time. That's insane.
Yeah. Wow. So he attended that with his uncle, and we've obviously watched that multiple times in the back. Like, I mean, we'll probably watch it within the next month or so, since we'll be getting into Royal Rumble season. And he can normally like remember who is going to come out when.
That's crazy.
like he can pretty much get it 1 through 30. I mean, obviously any wrestling fan knows that Flair came out at 3 and he won the whole thing, but he can get 1 through 30, be like, all right, who's next, Pony? And he'll say, like, I don't know, he'll say Rick Rude or Mr. Perfect or whoever,
Yeah.
and he'll get it. Doran's a wrestling fan.
Okay.
I don't know if you like know his full story there. He actually at
I
one
get
point,
one of the guys that I have on the show often, Josh Eisenberg. I think he's been on with Doran talking about wrestling before, so I
yes.
kind of know, but not really. Go ahead.
So Doran, after his football career was done, he actually went down to the Performance Center for some sort of tryout. I don't know. I forget what year it was. I don't know if anybody else really notable was in there. I assume there had to be at least a couple people who have since made
Probably.
it that were like in that group with him. But what I always thought was pretty cool, which is nice to like throw back in the face of people who just, kind of poke fun at wrestling. He said of all of the things that he's done athletically in his life, he said that is the single hardest thing he's ever done, without question.
Wow. And that's a perfect. And it's the guy who played football. Didn't he play? He played professionally.
He got in. Yeah, he got to the NFL.
Like that. In wrestling, being because it's so much. There's mental, there's physical, there's emotional. You have to be on the road all the time. Like, let alone just like trying out for it.
Yeah, he said it's the single hardest thing he's ever done.
Wow. Anybody else that you could definitively say or has mentioned something to you maybe?
There's a couple of producers there that are very into it.
Okay.
Charlie Borges, who I work with a good bit, he's one of the part-time guys. He is very into it. Like, we've had long conversations on air about it. Sean Myers, who's part-time there, he is actually Sean went to Plum, and I know you immediately think of Pat McAfee there when it comes to wrestling, but he is like legit longtime friends with Elias.
Oh, okay.
I forget what his first name's Jeff. I forget what his like real name is.
I can't recall either, to be honest with you.
Yeah, like I forget what his full name is, but I'm pretty sure Jeff is his first name. But yeah, Elias and Sean
cool.
Go way back. Like, they would hang out like when he was in town, whatever. I mean, obviously he's in town more now.
Oh yeah, for
doing
sure.
Like smaller stuff, but yeah, like there are a couple producers that are real into it.
Now, the other question I asked Josh, do you think there's anybody at the fan that's a closeted wrestling fan that does not want to mention it? Because he brought up that Pump might be someone that's into it, and I saw him with the special Penguins WWE title the other night after WWE night at the Pens game. So
I could see. I don't know about now, or I don't even know about like 20 years ago, but since Pomp goes back a way bit further than we do, I could definitely see him being a fan like in the same generation as like my dad, or even before that, where like the Hogan era, like what do they call it, the golden era? Is that
just the golden era from the 80s? Yeah. I would say maybe he even had a little bit of like Bruno Sammartino and like some of those older guys.
So actually, you bring up Bruno, that does spark my memory. Larry Richard, who is on the AM side, the 1020 morning host. He had, before Bruno's death, like a very long relationship with him. Like, he's worked on like a lot of documentaries and stuff like that. So like he's definitely a fan. I remember there was a night, it was after I attended WrestleMania this year, which I'm sure we'll get to, but I was talking about it on the show, and Larry actually called in like to just tell some of the stories about Bruno. And funny enough, I just met one of Bruno's sons the other night. I'm not sure when you'll post this, but when I did the Landon Roberts show a couple of nights ago at Minio's, I didn't like recognize him or anything. Like, just kind of looked like an athletic built dude who
Yeah.
was in like his 50s or 60s. And then he walked over to me and introduced himself. He said, "Hey, I'm Daryl Sammartino. I listen to you guys all the
Wow.
time. Like Bruno was my father." And
Oh my
I
God.
was like blown away.
Right?
I'm like, your dad was a like absolute legend. Like, I mean, he's
Yeah,
the
like
most
he's the guy.
legendary Pittsburgh wrestler of all time. Like even more
Yeah.
than Kurt Angle or really
Yeah.
anybody else that came after him. So
It
that was
starts with Bruno for sure. He's
yeah.
the longest reigning WWE champion of all time, 7 years.
Yeah. So that was pretty cool. That his
Wow.
son was in there, and I mean, he even said, now this would have predated me at the Fan, but he said that Bruno listened to the Fan all the time. So that's kind of
Wow.
funny to think about. Yeah.
That is wild to think about. Bruno Sammartino. Just I'll turn on the fan. Like it's like doing casual stuff, and he is like a legend, you know?
Yeah.
Wow, man. All right, well, that's pretty cool. I was just curious as to who maybe doesn't want to talk about it, or maybe they were fans and they kind of lost it. So I always find that stuff pretty interesting. Now, you discussed WrestleMania, so let's go into it. So we're recording this on a Thursday. I'm going to probably air it this Sunday to coincide with football. I think it's a perfect time. But the following Friday, WWE is coming back to Pittsburgh for a house show, a non-televised event, December 27th. And you mentioned an amazing house show that you got to go to as your first show. Great memory there. But you also mentioned how you went to WrestleMania 40. Now, this is something we talked about a little bit, and unfortunately, we didn't get the link up there, but there's a billion people there. What are you going to do? How was it? First of all, what are the pros and cons from a live experience as opposed to TV? And then we'll dive into the actual WrestleMania of it all.
I mean, I honestly, the con, besides like I guess like ticket price, like I really
Right.
can't think of any. Like it was that cool of an event. Like it is something that I will like hold with me forever. I That weekend made me feel like I was 6 years old again. And definitely the last like 10 to 15 minutes on Sunday,
Oh
obviously.
my God. Yeah. Right.
All that. Like you get Cena, you get The Rock, you get The Undertaker. But it was something that I'm really glad I did. And even though a little bit of money went into it, it's like, well, it might be now or never. Like who knows if
Yeah.
you'll get the chance to do it again. It's in Philly. It's drivable. You always feel a little bit better too when it's like a round number WrestleMania, because they're always pretty
Yeah.
good. Like obviously 1 started it all, 10 was pretty good, 20 was great, 30 was great. So
That's
I
genius.
also
I've thought of that too. They really make sure to make the big ones something. And they're always something, but that's 4 straight, 10, 20, 30, 40 that have had unreal endings.
yeah, so I had like that thought too, like all right, well it'll probably be pretty good.
Right.
And I went with, it was myself and 5 other guys, a couple guys from college, a couple of guys from high school. Sean Myers went to who I mentioned earlier. We first just had tickets for Sunday, which they were in like the upper level, like not super high up. And if you're kind of making it relative to like how the football field is there, probably on like the 30 or 40-yard line, like actually a pretty good view.
Okay. Oh yeah,
So
that's pretty good.
but we wanted to make sure we had Sunday locked down because we knew that would be like the bigger night. Then we kind of decided like going into that weekend as it was leading up, like, hey, they have pretty cheap tickets like up behind the stage for Saturday. So we got like kind of cruddy tickets for that. We're like, we could still see the ring. We could only see
Yeah.
like half the ramp, but it was just like the feeling of being in there. But man, nothing really matches that like live wrestling crowd, especially when it's something big like that. And it's different than like a sporting event because it's often like, you're kind of combatants on both sides.
Yeah.
It's either you're rooting for one team or the other. Sometimes you're not, buddy buddy with everybody
No.
in attendance, or wherever you go afterwards. And it was like the vibes were pretty unbeatable. Like, it was high energy going in. It was high energy during the show. It was the whole shebang. Like, it was pretty much everything I could have imagined and then some. So I'm really happy looking back that we decided to do it, because, like I said, maybe sometime down the road, but I wanted to make sure I at least got one in before, life really, took off with, marriage, kids, whatever it may be, where doing that stuff isn't going to be so easy.
No. And that's what I've been telling people too, man. It's like, I had been to 4 Manias before this one, but that was all pre-pandemic. And then that hit, and I just didn't make it work. And then I was like, it's Philly's just drivable, and it's only going to get bigger. It's only going to go to crazier. Like, it's Vegas next year. Like, it's the highest price. It's like eventually going to go across the pond, I think. Like, it's only going to get more expensive. So the times you can get in now likely are your best chances. Go ahead. You were going to say something?
Well, I was going to say, like, Vegas, like, that's immediately off the table. Like,
right.
Like, at least for me. Like, I mean, it's,
yeah.
I think I saw the prices too. Like, when
it's insane.
Like the pre-sale, or like when it hit public, and it was just ludicrous.
It is. The other thing I'd like to bring up with that is, like, just as a casual fan who, might not go to the live event, did it ever bother you that you don't get to hear the commentary? Like, how was that when you first realized, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe a little bit, which is funny, because, like, that's, like, given the field that I'm in, and, like, sometimes I even do, not for wrestling, but, like, I'll do, like, play-by-play for stuff on the side. But oddly, like, it never bothered me a ton, like, at other sporting events. And I, like, for example, like, my dad does like to be, like, one of those old guys when he used to go to games where he would just toss, like, the earphones in and try to have the radio call of the game on.
My dad did that with Penn's games. He'd mute it and listen to Mike Lang on the radio.
Yeah. So, like, I know there's some people who want to be able to hear the commentary there, but that just makes it, for me, like, when you get a chance to watch it back, you can kind of experience it in a different way. Like,
it is another perspective,
how it's, like, directed and everything. And I've said this to people too, and I have a lot of buddies from college who are, like, in the sports production field and everything, since a lot of us went to school for, like, kind of the same thing. I don't think there are really many things. I don't even think the Super Bowl matches the production value that WrestleMania pulls off every year. Like, it is a spectacle in every sense of the word.
And it's funny you brought that up, plus with what you brought up about, like, fans, because I always tell people, sure, you can go to the Super Bowl, but, like, do people want to go to the Super Bowl every year if you're not a fan of the two of the teams? No. If WrestleMania, it's guaranteed that you're going to enjoy probably most of the show. It's a guaranteed time, like 3+ hours, you're going to enjoy. And just live with other fans, like, you're all there rooting for certain people, but you're all really there for the same thing. So it's nice to be next to you as a fan of someone. It's just a nice camaraderie, I think, with a wrestling event compared to others.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you could, like, sense that, I feel like, around that stadium that whole weekend, in Philly, which I think has one of the best stadium setups in the whole country. Like, I mean, they have all the stadiums right there. They have plenty of parking. A lot better than what we have. That's for damn sure.
Absolutely.
They have that, like, Xfinity Live building in the middle there.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember, like, before the show Saturday, we were there. After the show on both nights, we were there, and it was a blast. Like, people were just, like, it just felt like everybody was so happy to be there. Like, there was zero animosity, and I've never really experienced that with any sort of event of that nature.
And I remember I was there, I think, before both shows, and they had, like, YouTube top 10 clips, and they would just be counting down different clips, and it was just wrestling. They'd be playing themes all day. There were people dressed up. It's unlike anything else, man. I'm really glad you got to see something like that and feel that, because there's only been 40 of them.
Yeah, we were in. Two of the guys that went with us, they wanted to go to that NXT show.
Oh yeah,
early on the Saturday. So 2 guys went there. 4 of us were just hanging out inside the Xfinity Live center, and we were just watching everything. Like, they had the screens in there. It's basically like a sports book. It's not a casino, but they just had that wall of screens. And at one point, Ric Flair just comes rolling into the place, and
not surprised.
Yeah, I mean, he probably had no clue like where in the world he was, but like everybody was going nuts. He walked right by me. Like, I got a video where like he walked like right next to the booth we were at. So
That's so funny.
that was pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm sure he was just floating through. Who knows what he was doing? And I mean, but that's it, man. Whenever you go around these places, I remember on Bourbon Street for Mania 34, there were wrestlers just walking along, like drinking and having a good time. Like, I ran into Bobby Lashley down there. I know Elias, we referenced earlier, he was down there doing like a concert. He was just playing guitar, just like walking Bourbon Street.
Oh, that's right.
It's just, you can't get that with other events, to me, like other like non-wrestling events.
Yeah, it really is. Like, it's kind of a mix of, and I forget where I heard this and who said it, but I mean, I'm definitely stealing it from somewhere. It's like, maybe it was Michael Cole. I feel like it was somebody who is like more on the announce team, but they said it's a mix of a sporting event and a rock concert. Like,
yeah, I would
one.
say that.
And I feel like it definitely matched those vibes.
For sure. And again, I just think anybody that has a chance to do any sort of live wrestling show, really, but to go to a WrestleMania, like I said, it was on my bucket list. But once I did it once, I if I could do it again, I'm trying to do it again as long as I can. Like you said, with as life gets longer, you have other things you got to take care of. So want to get them in when you can.
Yeah, I mean, I'd recommend it to anybody out there who is a wrestling fan and hasn't gotten to experience it. Like, if you have the means to pull it off, absolutely do it. You will not regret it.
Now, outside of the fans booing Rey Mysterio at number 30 because it wasn't Daniel Bryan, how fun was the Royal Rumble? Because that's an event. It's arguably just as fun as WrestleMania because of the match itself, and that's how it sells the event. You were there. I was there. How was it?
I think it is the single best match to get to experience live. I know that a couple of my friends had discussions like, oh, should we go to Indianapolis this year for it? But, we're not going to end up doing that, which is fine. Right. But like, even though we've had so many better ones than the one we did get in Pittsburgh, it's still cool because you get it so into the countdown. You don't know who's coming out next. You get the occasional surprise, which was great.
Oh, yeah.
I think in Pittsburgh we got Kevin Nash, who
that was wonderful.
Fortunately, he didn't tear his quad or get hurt or something when he came out there. That was the first time too I've ever heard Rey Mysterio get booed.
It was a once in a lifetime moment.
Yeah, but what I do remember, I was just talking to one of my friends about that show. Even though it's not necessarily remembered fondly, it did give us some cool moments to see as a fan. Like, you got Cena and Orton, which I think was that the last time they've had a title match.
Rumble unless they did it again at the end of the year, that was the next to last then. But I mean, it was they haven't had one. I remember at TLC 2014, they had one for both belts, but that was probably the last one. But Royal Rumble the same year, I think it's probably one of the last ones. And I'd like to see it again in Cena's retirement tour.
Yeah. So, I mean, one of the last times we got Cena Orton, the first match of the night was one of the best matches of the year, the Daniel Bryan Bray Wyatt match. You got like Brock Lesnar at that show, even though that match didn't really give you, like, it left plenty to be desired. It was still cool to see.
It was fun.
Brock Lesnar. So, I mean, there was still plenty of cool things that happened. Unfortunately, a predictable Rumble match itself with Batista returning. Everybody pretty much knew the guy was going to win. The other thing that I
did
remember, for about a decade, we got the last CM Punk appearance.
Oh my God! Yes,
at that show. He walked out the day after that. So, yeah, there were definitely cool things to remember from that one, even though maybe the entire event wasn't remembered so well.
And it's funny, CM Punk back in wrestling again, back in WWE again. Like you said, with Cena and Orton. And I wanted to ask you this now. Was that the first pay-per-view you went to?
Yes.
Royal Rumble? Okay.
Rumble 14, yeah.
So you hadn't been to any of the other ones in Pittsburgh previously?
Before that, the only show I had ever gone to was that Ocean City
show.
Otherwise, I would normally just watch, and before I could drive, I never really badgered my dad to get tickets or anything like that, because he always just said oh, you just watch it on TV, and then
it's a hell of an argument though.
Yeah, and at that point, I never even bought pay-per-views either. I would either try to find somewhere back then before the network came around that I could illegally stream, or I would legit have to look it up or wait until Raw the next night to know what happened.
Yeah, that's how it went sometimes. I remember for a while, before Buffalo Wild Wings, there was a place called Hooters, and that they had blast areas where they would show pay-per-views and stuff like that. But if you weren't in an area where you had an event area to show it, you had to wait, or you had to read it online, or if you didn't have online, things were so interesting and different then, and now it's anybody has access at any time.
Yeah, I didn't watch a live WrestleMania until 30, until the the debut of the network. So
good one to start though.
Yeah, it was a great one. So I mean, I've obviously since gone back to watch all of them, but yeah, I never watched any live as a kid. I always had to either use the internet, back in the day, internet where it wasn't even quite easy to get stuff as it is now, or wait until Raw the next night.
That's right. Speaking just quickly on the previous Pittsburgh pay-per-views, have you watched any of those in the past? I'll quickly run them down. SummerSlam 95, King of the Ring 98, which was Undertaker,
that one, absolutely,
Mankind. Unforgiven 01, where Kurt Angle wins the WWE title.
Yep.
And then No Way Out 05.
Yes, that's when JBL stuck his head out from under the ring.
Oh, he got chokeslammed through the ring.
Yeah. The barbed wire steel cage.
At the top.
Yeah.
And then the other two, Armageddon 07.
What happened there? I can't remember.
Edge, Batista, Undertaker, triple threat. Edge won the world title.
Ooh.
And Chris Jericho made his pay-per-view return after being out for 4 or 5 years.
Oh, I should go back and watch that.
Yeah. The other one, only because you brought up Cena and Orton, Bragging Rights 2009, Cena and Orton had a 60-minute Iron Man match, which, I mean, I was a fan of both guys, and I was staunchly in the Orton camp. Spoiler alert, he doesn't win. As mostly any match with Cena back then, but I'd say check any of those out. You didn't go to Extreme Rules in 2018?
No, I didn't go to that one.
Or Payback, the most recent one?
I did go to Payback, yes.
Okay.
So Extreme Rules in 2018, I think I was, that was in the middle. I was actually, I worked with a minor league baseball team, and that was during the summer. So I couldn't go to that one. But I did go to Payback, Labor Day weekend of last year.
Yeah.
And then there was another one, and there was Roadblock or something.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even have that. Roadblock End of the Line, which was December 2016, I think.
Yeah. I went to that one too. Which
I was there for that one.
That was fun. They had I think they had a women's Iron Man. It was only 30 minutes.
Charlotte and Sasha, maybe?
Yeah, that sounds right.
It was killer. And that's when I think the New Day lost their tag titles after being champions for over a year to the Bar, Sheamus and Cesaro.
Oh, I always liked that tag team.
Yeah, I did too. But I would, yeah, anytime you get a chance, I would check out any of those older Pittsburgh shows. There's good stuff on pretty much all of them. My one buddy, who he was like 6 or 7, went to King of the Ring '98, and he doesn't really recall it, but I'm like, dude, this is a match that this is a moment that like is the
Yeah.
most shown moment ever. WWE has shown it millions of times, and you happen to be there. Like, that's insane.
Yeah, I think it's within top 10, maybe top 5, like most iconic moment in wrestling history.
For sure. I
Yeah.
mean, for that to happen, and it's combined with you telling me that Pony was at the '92 Rumble. It's like you
Yep.
had no idea what you really were there for, and now it's like, wow, like you really experienced something legendary. And now you can kind of say that with Mania 40. Roman got dethroned. You had the
Yeah.
chaos of all those guys coming at the end.
Yeah, and who really knows, I guess, like if we'll ever see Undertaker in a ring again, because
Maybe not.
I know it took some convincing to get him out there in the first place, and
It did.
their first choice was Stone Cold, which I think a lot of people
Oh.
anticipated, which would have
Yeah.
been awesome. But I mean, I was happy with the surprise because I genuinely was surprised.
Yeah, I think it was great that we assumed chaos would happen, but we're like, well, if anybody's going to come out, it's Austin. And for
Yeah.
it to be the Gong instead, I thought was a great surprise. And the lights dim, and all of a sudden he's there, and 80,000 people couldn't see it. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I have a video of that on my phone, and maybe one of the loudest crowd reactions I've ever heard.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it was something. I remember we got back from it and we watched the main event like on Peacock, just to, like you said, different perspective here with how the commentators presented it, because you see it how you see it, and you don't know how like they want to show it to you, you know? Because we saw Undertaker behind him, but how they framed it, it was like, oh, it's next level, man.
Yeah.
For sure. So we're going to do one crossover event here, and then we're going to close out with rapid fire.
Okay.
So we're going to do the NFL crossover. This is probably the part I've been waiting to do the most. You wearing a Latino Heat shirt. I'm wearing the NFL 75 commemorative sweatshirt. You're Donny football, but today you're Donny wrestling. Football and wrestling are very intertwined. There have been numerous players that have ended up as wrestlers. I mean, like Goldberg, Roman Reigns. The list is really unlimited. Brock Lesnar, of course. Well, that's where we're going to, man. So here's some of the biggest things that I wanted to mention to you, if you're aware of them or not, and we'll kind of just shoot off that. First, WrestleMania 2, which is 1986, the WWF versus NFL Battle Royal. I do have the list. We've got Jimbo Covert, Bill Fralick.
Pit guy.
Yep. Russ Francis, Ernie Holmes, Harvey Martin.
Ernie Holmes.
Yep. Harvey Martin. And then, of course, William the Refrigerator Perry.
And was it either Perry or Fralick finished? Because Andre won, but
I think it was
Fralick.
I want to say it was Fralick that made it further than anybody.
Okay.
I want to say. So that's like one of the early incarnations of the NFL part of the things. I also would direct you to the Raw Bowl, which took place on, I think it was maybe January 1st. Let's see. Hold on. I have it pulled up here. It was actually when it was January 1st, 1996. It went head to head with Florida State and Notre Dame in the Orange Bowl, which had the Raw Bowl was a match, a football-themed gimmick match featuring the Smoking Guns versus Owen Hart and Yokozuna. And the mat is like green, like it's a field. The guys are wearing jerseys. It's very weird, to say the least, because it was like a one-time thing.
Is that on the network or on Peacock?
It should be on Peacock as an episode of Raw, the first of 1996.
Okay.
So I would check that out. And then, so you brought up Kevin Green. How could I not get to probably the best part? We start off with WrestleMania 11. The main event of that show is Bam Bam Bigelow versus Lawrence Taylor.
And Taylor could actually kind of go in the ring from what
there's a reason they had it at the main event, and it's not just because 1995 was a garbage year for wrestling all around.
Yeah, like that. That's not exactly a great WrestleMania, but I feel like those two guys actually put on a pretty good one.
They did. Lawrence Taylor, I think, comes off the middle rope with like a shoulder tackle. I don't know. It's a real fun match. And in there, I think Steve Mongo McMichael was a part of that. And we'll get to that now. Mongo was he had one episode of Monday Night Raw that he commentated, which I think was leading up to that WrestleMania thing. But then he goes and defects. He gets traded. Yep. And he goes to WCW. He's on the first 35 episodes of Monday Nitro as a commentator. He always brought his little dog, Pepe.
Yes. Yeah.
And he also was a member of the Four Horsemen. He won the United States title in 1997. But three matches, but one with Kevin Green that we'll talk about too. Great American Bash 96, Ric Flair, Arn Anderson versus Kevin Green and Steve Mongo McMichael. Just like football crossing over like that. And it kind of they're just letting them do it. You know, they're training them and saying, here, go do it. Like, do you think Lawrence Taylor's like success, lack of a better term, at Mania gave WCW hope? Like, hey, we could do it too.
Yeah, I think absolutely. Because you don't necessarily always have to be like the first to do something. I think, if WCW had in their minds, like, okay, well, we can take that, but how can we make it better? Like, I feel like that was sort of the philosophy that they had a lot of the times when they, kind of traded barbs. If Vince did something, then Eric Bischoff normally thought, okay, well, I'll do that, but I'll make it cooler. If Bischoff did something, Vince thought, okay, well, I'll take that and I'll make it cooler. So, I mean, I think that's what was like so great about both of those shows back then. That like they always had those ideas. You also like bring in the fact that, like I thought one of the biggest ways that WCW paid that off was the fact that Goldberg came up through pretty raw as a wrestler.
Yeah.
But was, he was a Georgia football legend. He played for the Falcons, got injured. The NFL thing didn't work out. And then they're able to pay off him chasing down Hogan with a match inside the Georgia Dome. Like that was always pretty sweet. Now, it was weird that they announced it like 3 days ahead of time. Like they gave it like very little build.
And it still sold out.
Yeah.
41,000 people for an episode of TV.
Yeah. So like that was always, I thought, a pretty cool example of it. It is cool to see the crossover. I mean, I still remember 20 years ago, Lesnar turns down a big WWE contract, tries to play for the Minnesota Vikings. The guy last played football in like high school.
Yeah.
He nearly makes the team. So
of anybody. Yeah. If anybody could do it, it would have been him. To make it anything
to show like what a great athlete the guy was. Then he does the UFC thing for
wins the heavyweight title.
Yeah. So yeah, like I do always like seeing the crossover there.
Yeah, so the last part of the crossover, and I wanted to do this only because I do have the shirt commemorating it. Slamboree 1997. And we've got Mongo versus Reggie White. And then in the main event was 6 Kevin Nash, Scott Hall versus Kevin Green, Ric Flair, and your dad's favorite, Roddy Piper.
Oh, okay.
On the same show.
What year did you say that was?
Slamboree 1997.
Okay. I got to watch that at some point. I didn't know. I never knew that Reggie White got in the ring.
Yeah, he got it, and it was against Mongo. So football on football, Packers versus Bears. They love that. Like did
he do like his famous hump move that he always? That's how he always threw off like offensive tackles.
I definitely think they played off of it. It's been a while since I've seen it, so I'll probably have to revisit it as well. But yes, throughout the years, man, just up and down, the crossover is pretty amazing. So I wanted to leave you with that topic. What current NFL players would be great at pro wrestling? Clearly, any of the Kelseys, any of the Watts. I thought Tom Brady is like Ric Flair. Like, who would work for you? Pat McAfee, another great. I mean, he's probably top of the line right now, commentating in ring. So who do you think currently would be a great pro wrestler?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad you brought up the Kelseys, because that was another part of WrestleMania that I anticipated Jason to be involved some way, shape, or form, because I knew without really knowing the guy that he was a pro wrestling fan. Like, you can just tell sometimes. So like I had a feeling in that Mysterio match when like you saw somebody just hop the barrier with a mask. I'm like, that
massive man.
Yeah. And then he he took it off. He was loving it. Man, that's a good question. I'm trying to think of like just Steelers for starters. I mean, I honestly think like Hayward would be a good one.
Oh, yeah, I think he could be for sure.
You know who would definitely be a good one? Doesn't still play, but James Harrison, absolutely.
Oh my God,
I think
that'd
he
be
was
terrifying.
No, wasn't he? Was he?
Yeah. There's a whole episode
Heels,
of
I think it's called.
That. Yeah. There's something else I forgot to bring up. I can't believe I didn't mention this in the crossover.
Big Ben when he
Ben and the entire offensive line, they were in the ring.
Yeah, that was great, because it was also funny. That show just wasn't in Pittsburgh. It was in like Wilkes-Barre.
I know. That's a little
So half the crowd booed him. Because half of them weren't. I mean, probably more than half the crowd, like, they weren't Steeler fans.
I love that.
He's out there wearing he's got like a shirt that just says cash on it. It's like a 5X.
And his hat is like that big fitted.
Yeah, backwards hat. Yeah, he had like 3XL jeans on that were dragging off the floor. Like,
classic Big Ben. James Harrison though, for sure.
Yeah, Harrison would be a really good one.
Richard Sherman probably for promo work.
Yeah. Man, I'm still trying to think of like
maybe Ocho Cinco and promo work too. Any of the guys that talk a lot. So any wide receiver.
Yeah. You could take a lot of those like 2000s era wide receivers, like T.O. I mean, T.O.'s still in fantastic shape, so maybe he could even try it now. An interesting one would be Polamalu.
Yes, it would be.
He's got the hair.
You talk about real. He's a part of the bloodline.
Yeah. I also now here's a good one too. Both guys on the Steelers offensive line. You have Sayamalu, you have Faltanu. You could have those guys join in on the bloodline as a couple.
That's
of big
incredible.
Bodies.
And I didn't mention Rob Gronkowski, that he was he was a 24/7 champion in WWE. He like in the like the pandemic WrestleMania, but I mean he hosted it.
Yeah, he was at another one too, where I think it was actually before.
Oh yeah, Mania 33. He helped Mojo Rawley, former football player, win the Battle Royal.
Yeah, he was somebody who I thought would get more into it, but he never did.
Yeah,
I thought he would stick around for a little while.
Yeah, I would have thought so too. I'm trying to think of anybody else that really. I mean, any coaches maybe. Just characters in general. I don't know. Like Paul Heyman, I could. Bill Belichick would be like Paul Heyman to me.
Yeah, Mike Ditka would have been a good one.
Mike Ditka would have been an amazing one.
Jerry Jones, I think, as an owner, would have been like. I remember Mania was at 32 when they were in Dallas. I always thought
that was my first one.
I always thought they were going to have Jerry Jones like come out to interrupt Vince, and then they would have like Stone Cold just roll out there and just stun both of them or something like that.
Would have loved to have seen Jerry Jones take a stunner. He couldn't take it worse than Vince.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, that one he took a couple years ago was
terrible.
Well, yeah.
Same with Pat McAfee's was good though.
Oh, his was great. Yeah, his Theory took a really good one.
Oh yeah, of course. All the guys who are trained, and Vince is like, I'll do it. I still got it.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a good question. But I feel like we got some pretty good ones there.
I think so too. And I mean, I brought it up just at the top. The obvious ones are probably the best ones: the Watts, the Kelseys, the guys that are so over the top, but that's who they are, and it just translates perfectly into the pro wrestling world if they were to do that. It's just you can't taunt in the NFL apparently, or
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess maybe George Pickens could
He's done
pop
some
in.
moves. He did like
Yeah.
an elbow on the one guy.
Yeah, he did try to drop an elbow.
He just throws. He's like Darby Allin or Jeff Hardy. He's just flinging himself on people.
Yeah,
Oh my God.
he could hop in the ring at some point.
Absolutely. So I think we've touched on pretty much everything I'd like to touch on in long form. So I always like to do a rapid fire to close out the show. I have one small thing to officially close it, but the rapid fire is like my favorite because it's always interesting topics. I've kind of catered it to you specifically a little bit. I've altered it. So just yes or no, or a little bit of elaboration. We're not going to be
first
as
thing pops into my head.
First thing, yeah. Free association, if you will. Favorite face of Foley?
Cactus Jack.
Hell yeah. Hogan or Flair?
Flair.
Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart?
Michaels. This will actually be a hot take. I am not a fan of Bret Hart.
Ooh, that is a hot take.
I thought the guy was, great in-ring performer, horrible on the mic. I thought he had like next to zero charisma.
The charisma seemed to be lacking at times. Yeah, I could agree with that.
I always thought he was one of the biggest crybabies in wrestling history.
He still hates Goldberg to this day.
Yeah, Bill Goldberg. It's always
Bill Goldberg, yeah.
Full name.
Oh man.
Yeah, so I'm all in on HBK there.
That's right, Mr. WrestleMania. Favorite type of juice box, excluding this podcast?
Oh, does Capri Sun count?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Favorite big man all time in pro wrestling?
Now, what's like your cutoff with like?
What do you mean?
Like, I didn't know if you would say, like, if Dusty Rhodes was a big man versus like
he's a big. I think if they're big guys, they're big guys. I don't think there's really it's whatever you want it to be. Like I think Dusty Rhodes absolutely could count in that.
Yeah, I would go. I think I'd probably go Dusty Rhodes. The American.
Yeah. Yeah, that he's a legend, and he made it. He was one of the guys that made it okay to not have the shredded body and everybody's jacked up on roids, and he's just like, no, I'll be me. I got my his birthmark on his stomach. Like he just didn't care. He's just like, I'm Dusty Rhodes, and that's who it is. If you watch a pay-per-view, would you prefer it on a Saturday or a Sunday?
I actually like that they have changed them to Saturdays. Maybe it's, since I'm venturing closer to the age of 30, like if you ask like college age me, I would say keep them on Sundays because I'm trying to, get after it with the boys on a Saturday at like a house party. But now that I'm normally not doing anything too late into a Saturday, I kind of like that they're Saturday nights.
I agree. I tend to agree. Same with the Sunday because I kind of grew up on it. Like that's just what it was. And like you find out what happened the next day on Raw or like at school. Like you didn't really. There was no other way to do it. Saturdays were sometimes happened with WCW. They'd put one on there, and I always felt it was like special that they did it. Mm-hmm. But now, especially since WWE and UFC are the same company, they just run it all on Saturday, and I think it's better for everybody, to be honest.
Plus, it gives them the option to do like the 2-night thing when they want to.
What are your thoughts on that quickly? Do you like the 2-night WrestleMania? Because they're going to do 2-night SummerSlam starting next year, and there's rumors that they could do it for the Rumble, having a women's and men's on both nights.
Yeah, I think for Mania, it's good because you give, like, I think it's smart how they've done the last couple, like mostly under the Triple H model where, you give the matches a true, like, meaningful amount of time and, you're able to spread things out. You don't have to rush through things because we definitely saw that through some of the final Vince McMahon WrestleManias.
Oh my God.
I didn't feel any of that with what I experienced this year, what I watched the last couple of years. So I kind of like that model. I do wonder, like, should they just keep that for WrestleMania though? Because if you start to do that for some of the others, like, I don't know, WrestleMania is, it's the granddaddy. So
Yeah.
do you want to have other ones that feel like they're on the same level as WrestleMania? I don't know. So I guess like to be determined on some of the others to see how good they are put into practice.
And that's what I would agree with, is like WrestleMania was always one night and it was always the biggest night. And then the last one before the pandemic, and I was there, the main event, which is the women's triple threat, started after midnight Eastern Standard Time.
I remember that, yeah. 35.
Yeah. So I was
that was a long day. Day.
So I was thrilled that, something good came out of the pandemic, and they took the New Japan model of having a 2-night big show, because they had their Wrestle Kingdom on 2 nights. And it's a chance to give all the talent space, time, and an opportunity. And you can main event a night of WrestleMania and it counts as like main eventing it. And it makes things more special for them. So if they do it with SummerSlam, maybe it'll work. But like once like you said, you start doing it to other shows, it's like, oh, was WrestleMania not as special now? Like, how are we supposed to view that? So to be determined. I look to your answer for that for sure. Favorite Chris Farley movie first, and then role, if that's the same thing, and then quote, if you have one.
I will go with where he's like the main character. I'll go with Tommy Boy. My favorite role for him is just when he's the bus driver in Billy Madison.
Yeah.
In like that whole sequence when Miss Vaughn gets on the bus, like that Veronica Vaughn is one piece of eight. Like that whole sequence there, I think, is like the best between him and Sandler.
Oh my! And then would you consider that your favorite quote of his then?
Yeah, I would say that whole part is.
So Tom, I would agree with Tommy Boy. I'm also very partial to Black Sheep because it's practically the same movie.
Yeah.
With a different plot, but I love when David Spade's looking for him and he comes in off the tree, like the swing on the tree, and he's like, "Hello, Washington." And he does like a huge flip into the lake.
He would have gone down as like maybe the funniest person to ever live if he made it longer.
I think he's still probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest physical comedian of all time. Yeah, he's like the Mick Foley.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more. Are you interested in a potential Rock versus Cena 3?
Yeah. I know that people may not be, but I mean, something like that, it's so easy to sell. I mean, you see it happen all the time, like in real fights, like UFC or boxing, like you want to have 3, like they should absolutely take an opportunity to do that.
Especially since Cena's going to be retiring next year. The Rock's back in the fold these days. It's right there if they want it.
Yeah. I think they can do it.
And then your favorite era of The Undertaker.
So this will probably be a hot take too. I appreciate all of them, but I actually liked the like American Badass, like Big Evil Undertaker, which I think is absolutely in the minority for people.
Probably overall, but he was pretty damn popular all throughout his career, and I think the switch up kind of made him more endearing, and it gave him more options.
Yeah, and then I think when he went away from that and had the big, the big payoff at WrestleMania 20 and leading up to that, like kind of messing around with Kane. So yeah, I go with that one, like coming out on the bike, which he did like late in his career too, where he kind of meshed, like Deadman and American Badass together for like that match he did with AJ Styles. So I've always been in that camp.
And then just quickly, what are your thoughts on Monday Night Raw going to Netflix? For as long as we've been alive, it has been on TV every Monday night forever. And now all of a sudden it's going to be to the biggest audience, a worldwide audience that can watch it at any time, no matter where it's being filmed. It's a huge deal. What are your thoughts?
I mean, I'm hoping they don't run into any sort of buffering issues for one, like we've seen with some other live events on there. But I think it's a pretty exciting like push to the future. I think Triple H has like a really good eye for that. And I mean the company has always been pretty like cutting edge, I feel, on things. Like
For sure.
even though Vince started to kind of lose it, the last handful of years, like they were always ahead of the curve on some things,
Mhm.
willing to try different ideas, whatever it may be. I think it opens up a lot of pretty cool possibilities for them. So, I mean, I know that like like I was saying, I don't get to always watch it live every single Monday, uh, or I don't get to watch SmackDown live every single week. But I'm absolutely going to be tuned in for probably that last uh, Raw episode on USA, and then absolutely the first one on Netflix.
Yeah, it's gonna be a huge deal, man. It's wild, and this is how I was gonna close it out anyway, so it kind of works. I mean, you being a football fan, of course. I mean, I'm a huge football fan too, but just like that's kind of your thing. Much like with football, I would say pro wrestling very similar in the fact that we've watched it for how long, both, and you remember the past fondly, and yet as you grow, sometimes certain things maybe fall off in other realms of entertainment. But we've been talking for how long now? It's getting better. There's a lot ahead for the future, and it's great that we had the past, and now as we get older, we have a greater appreciation for the whole, piece of it as we move forward. So I think the future's bright with pro wrestling, it being available to more people. And it's just like you look back and you see your Hulk Hogan's and your Ric Flairs, and you look back at your Tom Brady's or your Peyton Manning's, and now it's Patrick Mahomes, and now it's, Seth Rollins. And you get these generational things, but the longer it goes, it's like a huge just gap of we have all this to enjoy. So what about that for you? Like makes you love football and wrestling? It's the same type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess like sometimes you just see like how they mirror each other. It's just like it's just different guys, but they kind of match what you saw like 20 years ago. Growing up, it was Brady who always tended to beat out Peyton Manning when it mattered. Now it seems like it's Patrick Mahomes who's always beating out Josh Allen when it matters. You had your electric guys who could maybe get on the doorstep of the Super Bowl, but couldn't go through with it. Like who knows? Like maybe Joe Burrow is what Dan Marino was, a guy that got to the Super Bowl in year two, never got back. That could be him. Uh, Lamar could be a guy who is one of the great individual players we ever see who never even gets to the Super Bowl. And I feel like wrestling, like you kind of hit that same thing. Like you have your Flair and Hogan, you have Austin and Rock, then you have Cena, Orton, and now you have guys like Roman Reigns who have carried this thing into the future, and then you are still able to bring back guys like Cena, The Rock, whoever else. You're going to have other guys that carry it into the future. Uh, Braun Breaker probably one of them. Gunther
For
probably
sure.
one of them. So I think it's cool that like maybe it's not the same exact thing the whole way through, but you can like see like almost a mirror image of maybe what you saw years ago.
Right. And it's just like nice to see like future is bright. Like WWE, like pro wrestling always hits on that nostalgia. So this damn whole show has been about nostalgia and things that we used to like, but it's now we remembering WrestleMania 40 and how great that'll be for a memory for you. And I love that same type of thing because pro football, I mean, I guess they have like the Hall of Fame with nostalgia, and they'll bring guys out for retiring their jerseys and stuff like that. So like you said, man, it very much mirrors it, and that's exactly why I had you in the juice box today. Any final words just on pro wrestling as a whole, just to sign off?
I mean, well, I appreciate you having me, man. It was pretty cool to go down memory lane. I know it was a question you didn't have in there, but favorite WrestleMania of all time for me is actually 19. 17's right up there. 17, an iconic one. 19 was like that first one from my childhood. Plus that
It's great.
a great WrestleMania. So I just wanted to get that in there. But yeah, I mean, I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you willing to come in, taking the time. I know we tried to pinpoint these days, busy time of year. It's football season, and you're in here talking wrestling, so I could not be more grateful for that. So appreciate it. Anything you want to plug? I mean, you're all over the place these days, man.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to try to find me on Twitter, it's at DonChed54. So that's DONCHED 54. That's really it. Otherwise, you can hear me on 93.7 The Fan pretty much daily. I have a lot of days to use here at the end of the year. So you might not hear me so much right now because it's use them or lose them time. But yeah, you can pretty much hear me almost every day on there.
That's right. So yeah, man, appreciate you coming in. Looking forward to the rest of the football season, as well as, wrestling is kicking into high gear. We've got the Royal Rumble next month, or February rather, the first Raw on Netflix. I mean, we're already on the road to WrestleMania, and this is earlier than it's ever been. So it's a great time to be a fan of any type of entertainment, whether it's your realm or mine. So I appreciate it, man. For Donny Wrestling, I am Juice Springsteen, and I will see you guys next time for another edition of the Juice Box.
That was the Juice Box with Juice Springsteen. Make sure to subscribe to the Juice Box wherever you listen to podcasts.